but there are a couple things that I did want to get to, and I do admit I want to start with extending some of the fun we had Saturdays with Renee. Shout out to Renee and Geechee, and again, more importantly, shout out to Erica and Amber for this what I expect should be a piece of media that they've produced that will continue to bear fruit as we as any number of us look to find ways to break through some of these narratives and mythologies and that are just constantly produced. So again, if you somehow missed it, please go see the latest episode of Brokish, featuring an interview with John Hope Bryant, the financial literacy guru, as he spends an hour or more exposing his own flaws, but more importantly, the flaws of financial literacy and black capitalism and the prevailing analyses. Then if you didn't see our Saturdays with Renee extended discussion of that, please go check that out. I'm just going to add one piece that we didn't get to Saturday that I had in my notes that I'll just get to today. But again, a bulk of the breakdown of the critique is on the last episode of Saturdays with Renee. But I want to play this. So let me just play this one little clip that we didn't get to of Bryant responding to something from Erica, a question from Erica, and then you'll see the flaw that I'm trying to expose here. You'll see that pretty clearly.
I feel like that's not why people get upset. I feel that I think when we think about this term, this idea of a free market, right? And the assumption oftentimes in a free market is that everybody has equal information. And I think it's clear, and I think that's even one of the points you're making is that everybody doesn't have equal information, right? So people go to you give them more information, you give them financial literacy education, then they're able to do different things. But in a capitalist society, people like us, individuals, don't have the same tools, don't have the same level of information. And even when we get access
Look at
to
him
that,
holding up his phone. Come
we
on.
can't participate equally and evenly as compared to some organizations. Like you mentioned banks, right? You work with banks. And even many of the banks that you've talked about over the course of decades have regulators within their ranks because they have not been playing fairly, right? So you talk about like, it's not people, right? It's the systems, and the systems don't discriminate. Well, they actually do. And so I think that's the hard part is when we talk about financial literacy, we are talking about individual actors in this system that unfortunately capitalism is racist. It's racial capitalism that rules this nation. And so if we consider that we're living in this racial capitalist state, then how do I as an individual person fight the behemoth that is all the things you talked about? How do I escalate issues that I find at my bank? If I have an issue at JP Morgan Chase, how do I work against that system?
So you're wrong, Erica. Capitalism is not racist. Capitalism is capitalism. Capitalism is not personal. Capitalism don't give a damn about you, me, or the man in the balloon or an opinion. Business is not personal. Capitalism is just simply capital. I just told you it's a table with two people on the side of it. Now, can you have actors in capitalism that are racist? Of course you can. By the way, just to be very clear about this, because I'm an investor in Wells Fargo. If you have a 401k, you're an investor in Wells Fargo. I'm an investor in Bank of America. So this whole concept that it's a white bank or that is a 20th century concept.
And by the way, those banks literally used to have enslaved people on their books.
Erica,
they literally used to have them on their books.
Erica, I listen to you. Now I want you to listen to me. I actually am an expert on money.
His expertise is not in money, and it's not in understanding how capitalism works, unless he is willfully lying. So assuming he's being honest, he's just exposing how little he knows about all the things he claims to be an expert in. So as we talked about Saturday, he doesn't even know who he's talking to or the women that are interviewing him or what their areas of expertise are. He doesn't know anything about them or their program. It's clear. But the point that what he's also exposing in his ignorance about everything from, if there's no such thing as white and black banks, why are we being told all the time to support black banks? What then does that mean about the race and the class of the mostly white men who run these dominant white banks? But really what he's doing there is, I think, trying to mask his own business model that we talked more about on Saturday, which is to bring black investment and black money into white banks and to be paid for it. And when Erica's work comes out on the history and the dissemination of financial literacy and its political function, it'll be even more clear how little he knows. And how foolish he looks in this interview, talking to her and Amber that way. Holding up his phone as he did to say to her, everyone has equal information because they have access to anything anyone else has access to because of their phone. That is such a disturbing lack of understanding of capitalism, finance, and investment that in addition to everything we said Saturday, that alone should disqualify him. And I'm going to show you why I'm saying that here in a second. In fact, let's just get to it right now. So when I first saw the interview and I saw that section where Bryant's holding up his phone and telling Erica and Amber that they don't know what they're talking about and they're talking to this expert, and he's telling them that when Erica is saying, look, in a racist capitalist society, there is no equal access to information. And for capitalism to work, as Bryant and others would claim, everybody would have to have equal information. And to Bryant's claim, everyone, of course, does have equal information. Well, this has been something that economists have been studying for a long time and demonstrating is a flaw in the conventional baseline way capitalism or economics are taught in this country to many, including to people apparently like Bryant, where you get these fantasies of supply and demand mythologies that themselves require at their base equal access to information, that everybody is operating on the same market information. And what Erica was, I think, trying to show him is that that racism, along with other, or capitalist competition alone, demand and demonstrate that there is no equal access to information. And when I saw the video, I was immediately reminded of something that I read years ago as I was trying to teach myself more about how all of this works. And one of the people that I read at the time was Joseph Stiglitz, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, who in a recent interview, I don't know if we'll get to it this morning, but in a recent interview on Bloomberg, Stiglitz did what many liberal economists would do when asked basically, why would Trump be worse than Kamala Harris, and then giving an answer, which includes Harris being better on tariffs with trade partners than Trump. The Bloomberg interviewer says to him, well, the tariffs Trump put on China and U.S. allies when he was in office the first time, Biden left on there. And Stiglitz went into this thing, but Kamala's gonna be better and reduce the tariffs on China, get rid of the tariffs on our allies in Europe, and whatever. But I just thought that was funny. So he's a liberal economist. He's no revolutionary. But one of the things he was writing about in the early 2000s was the asymmetries of information and economic policy. In fact, as he talks about in this brief article in Project Syndicate from 2001, this is what he and his colleagues won a Nobel Prize for writing about. Now, again, he's no revolutionary, so he's not advocating some socialist or better solution. He's just simply saying, as it says here, well, let's just read a little bit of it. Maybe John Hope and his crew can learn a little something, despite him being the expert. This year's Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences went to George Akerlof of the University of California, Berkeley, Michael Spence of Stanford University, and myself for our work on asymmetry of information. What is that work about, and why did we undertake it? All right, so this is, again, Bryant, we would assume this would mean something to him, a Nobel Prize winning economist. For 200 years, economists used simple economic models that assumed that information was perfect, i.e., that all participants have equal and transparent knowledge of the relevant factors. They knew that information wasn't perfect, but hoped that a world with moderate imperfections of information would be akin to a world with perfect information. We showed that this notion was ill-founded. Even small imperfections of information could have profound effects on the economy on how the economy behaved. The Nobel Committee cited our work on asymmetries of information, an aspect of the imperfections of information caused by the fact that different people in a market know different things. For example, the seller of a car may know more about his car than the buyer. The buyer of insurance may know more about his prospects of having an accident, such as how he drives, than the seller. A worker may know more about his ability than a prospective employer. A borrower may know more about his prospects for repaying a loan than the lender. But asymmetries of information are only one facet of information imperfections, and all of them, even when small, can have large consequences. So even in this part here, where the assumption is just some silliness about how much a seller of a car or a buyer of a car reveals in their insurance and this, that, and the third, they're already saying just little things like that can have massive or large consequences. Now, take into consideration what Erica was just simply trying to impart to dear brother Bryant, that in a racist society where white men, mostly elite white men, have all the access to information, to training, to education, to resources, to investment, to policy making, how can anyone argue that we all can just hold up our cell phone and have equal access to anything? How can he argue that anyone in the economy can just pick up their cell phone, Google, and know as much as him or anyone else? In fact, in different fields, admittedly, I run into this as a problem in the classroom all the time, where students want to believe that things as simple and easy as Black history or communications or propaganda can all just be studied with a few TikToks, a couple videos, they're already trying to say, hey, I just need access to my phone and I can, literally a student told me that a few semesters ago, I can learn anything you would teach me in this class just by using my cell phone. And we as experts who know better are trying to explain the world is more complicated than doing a few Google searches or finding one article, for instance. And yet this man would sit there with that level of arrogance and condescension and tell Erica, never mind what she's actually studying, racial capitalism, sociological effects on the economy, financial literacy, all this other, never mind her career. And I would have loved for her to break down her career for him. and how it is she's even come to doing this work in the first place. But but he's saying all of that's irrelevant because you just have your phone. And meanwhile, again, Stiglitz is, he's all right, but he's not where we might be. But he's a Nobel Prize winning economist. Literally won the Nobel Prize for asymmetries in information. And this dude is going to sit up there and talk about nah. And what Stiglitz is saying is that these are simplistic models that demand equaled supply. So when they talk about supply and demand, so the joke was that you could teach a parrot to be an economist by simply repeating demand and supply. This produced rather curious results. If the demand for labor equaled the supply, for example, there couldn't be any unemployment. I grew up in an industrial town on the south shore of Lake Michigan, Gary, Indiana, and saw poverty, unemployment, and discrimination. I entered economics because I wanted to understand and do something about these phenomena. To be taught models that began by assuming that unemployment didn't exist seemed a peculiar place to begin. Because obviously there's unemployment. But in the simple supply and demand teaching, he's saying they make it seem like everything's equal. There's always going to be the demand for labor will equal supply, and then a couple corrections here and there. There's no unemployment. Just moving ahead a little bit, because this part prefaces where I want to get next. It is an irony of history that just a host of researchers around the world were developing these ideas and enhancing our understanding of the limitations of markets. International economic It is an irony of history that just as a host of researchers around the world were developing these ideas and enhancing our understanding of the limitation of markets, international economic institutions were pushing the Washington Consensus based on market fundamentalism, which ignored market failures. Long story short, I'll put the link in the show description so anyone can check my work and my analysis or interpretation of this. But what Stiglitz is saying, relevant, one, to what I'm doing here this morning, market fundamentalism. We're going to come back to that. This ideology of market fundamentalism was being pushed by international economic institutions as the Washington Consensus, which ignores the so-called fantasy of a free market and any limitations of market dominance. What John Hope Franklin was pushing and is pushing, whether he's aware of it or not, is the contemporary version of this Washington Consensus. It is a white conservative capitalist ideology of market fundamentalism that is being trickled down through to, and then through yet again, John Hope Bryant and unfortunately his unwitting audience. And Stiglitz is saying, as we're out here studying and winning Nobel Prizes for showing the flaws in market fundamentalism, the Washington Consensus is like, I don't give a damn how many prizes you win. I don't give a damn how much analysis you come up with. Anything that's not full-blown free market fundamentalism is a step towards socialism and communism and therefore must be squashed. And in to play his part to Black audiences is John Hope himself. Just wrapping up here real quick. As Stiglitz says, ideas can sometimes be as powerful as interests. When old ideologies and interests work together as they have in the past, some interests get served and others get left behind. Asymmetries of information are related to asymmetries of economic market power. There is a role for government not only in correcting market failures, but in redressing these asymmetries of power. There's why market fundamentalism don't want anything in there. There's why market fundamentalism don't want anybody raising these questions, because any of this is seen by them as a step towards socialism. As Bryant and others promote this market fundamentalist, Washington consensus capitalist ideology, disguised as black equality, liberation, or or freedom, or whatever. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.